listen very, very carefully.
The gentleman posed a question. Will you answer the gentleman's question?
You've got to challenge. You've got to rock the damn boat.
I'm ready if you are.
I showed it being an artist. I had the soul of an artist, the temperament of an artist, the intellect of an artist.
That's a good idea.
All right, Doctor, tell us the truth.
And Soul!
Truth and Soul Incorporated, the New Zealand advertising podcast.
Hello and welcome to episode 4 from the Truth and Soul Incorporated podcast, where we look at some of the figures who made New Zealand advertising what it is today, for better or worse. Today we talk to Jill Brinsdon, who I suspect may well have been the first female creative director in New Zealand advertising. Jill worked at Saatchi's way back when, as well as Mojo, Ogilvy and what was Ted Bates, I believe. She talks about how an innocent girl from Invercargill came to be running two of her own agencies, currently Radiation and Tricky. Two agencies seem a bit greedy, but we'll let that go. We'll also hear how she came to be running an international oil business and what happens when you have a tug-of-war between a giant truck and a tug on a Californian pier.
And Soul!
So today I am talking to Jill Brinsdon, who has a couple of agencies at the moment, or...
Yeah.
A couple of agencies. And of particular interest is that Jill was, I believe, and we'll shortly find out whether or not that's any element of truth in that, the first female creative director in New Zealand.
I've certainly been given that title. I remember from those days there were not plenty, that's a complete lie, a few other women in smaller agencies.
Yeah.
But I was the first one that stepped up. It was Ogilvy where I first got the title.
Yeah.
And it was a super big deal that it was a chick, as you can imagine.
So how did it come about? How did you end up in advertising in the first place?
The only thing I was good at was English at school.
Yeah.
And I was exceptionally good at that, speech writing, debating, writing essays, knew how to hold a room.
Yeah.
Crap at everything else.
Yeah.
Not crap, but just had to work really hard to get 62%. So it was always going to be English. Left school with my finger, literally my middle finger in the air, walked past the science lab 3 months before the end of the 7th form.
Which school was that?
That was in Invercargill.
Ah, Invercargill.
I'm a southern girl.
Okay, I didn't know that. I have been there, and I've been to Stewart Island, and my second dog is from Invercargill, so there's a strong connection there.
I'm happy I grew up in Invercargill. I was embarrassed when I was 18 and I left, but I'm really happy that I'm a southern girl. It's made me, we're good, strong girls. So the best job that was in Invercargill was at 4ZA. I thought the radio station would be a cool place to work.
Yeah.
So I rocked up and they interviewed me. And they gave me a copy test, which was like 3 hours long. And I loved it because all I had to do was come up with ideas. It seemed like a miracle to me that there was even just come up with ideas.
Such a thing, yeah.
I thought, I just couldn't believe there was such a thing. It was the last year Radio New Zealand had broadcasting cadets. And so I was made a cadet, which was super cool because that meant you got a couple of months in every single department. And I look back and I was so goddamn oblivious. Didn't have a clue. Just thought, this is amazing. I'm getting money.
So you weren't aware kind of how lucky you were to
no concept.
Be working at a radio station with no experience, no nothing.
No. Well, I was a cadet, so they were looking for a baby.
Yeah.
So I was the baby. And then got into the copy department, really liked promotions, really liked doing all sorts of other things. Got into the copy department and I won an award like within 3 months. Again, oblivious. Like, oh, what? What happened? Went up to Wellington, still didn't really know what that was about. Like, seriously.
An advertising award or a radio award?
Yeah, radio advertising award. Yeah. And then I was singing my own jingles and I was voicing my own ads and I just thought it was amazing. I was an actor, at the time as well. So I was there for 18 months and then I thought I have to leave. So I went to Wellington and got a transfer to 2ZM and that was fantastic. And then I realised that radio wasn't, where it was going to be. So I needed to get a job in a proper advertising agency.
What, because you thought radio was limiting?
Yeah, and again, reasonably oblivious, just thought, looks like I've got a career. I should branch out now. I'd like to do TV ads. I didn't even know what that meant. I want to do TV ads. So I took my radio reel around all the agencies and
In Welly.
in Wellington, yeah, and I got a job at Mackay King, which at the time was the agency.
So Terry King.
Yep, Terry King hired me.
Yeah.
Terry King hired me twice, actually. So he hired me when the creative director was in fact away. So there was
Who
some
was the
control.
creative
Creative
director?
director was a guy called Bob Hall,
Yeah.
who ended up being my father-in-law.
Okay.
So yeah, I got hired by Mackay King. I really got put in a room and nobody gave me any guidance. And to be honest, I was lost, really lost. Sat in this little room. I think I sat there for a year. I did some nice radio work. I did some print work. I was really, I don't know why they hired me.
So who taught you how to do print ads? You just
I
picked it
just
up.
kind of
from
figured it out.
Yeah.
Does anybody, nobody teaches you anything much. Well,
Well,
nobody
they do
taught me
these
much.
days.
Yeah, I'm sure they do.
Yeah,
I'm
well,
sure
they
they
try
do,
to,
but they
yeah.
just basically hired me for what I thought was a miracle of a salary and threw me in a room. So I did the best I could, but I was sincerely quite lost. Wasn't put off or anything.
And you didn't have an art director to work with. You were just
No, I had art
Work
directors
out, yeah.
occasionally. I was literally put in a room by myself. It's called my office. And occasionally I'd get connected up. So I remember working with Howie Campbell and, God, I'm terrible with names. Another dude who was really clever called Peter. This isn't good for your history of advertising.
no, that's okay.
Yeah,
The memory is
they
what
were
it
older,
is.
senior guys. It's for my. I've got one of those brains that if I don't need the information, it'll just be gone.
Yeah.
I know. So I did that for 9 months or whatever, a year maybe, and then I went overseas and did what all Kiwis do and went to London and
Yeah.
got a job in an advertising agency there.
Oh, which one?
I seem to be able to get jobs in advertising
Yeah.
reasonably easily. It was a small agency in Charlotte Street. I think it was
Yeah, called Saatchi's. Yeah.
yeah, it was called Saatchi's. I did loads of ads for Our Price Records, and
Yeah.
I did the first series of ads that were when record companies started to actually properly promote album releases,
Yeah.
and they made ads.
Yeah.
And because it was the first time that it
So,
happened,
so what year was this, roughly?
in the 80s, somewhere in the 80s,
Yeah, okay. So what we can date it by what albums you were doing ads for.
I was working. Yeah, that's true. Yeah, Simple Minds, Thompson Twins, The Eurythmics.
Okay, that's I'm going early 80s,
Somewhere.
45.
In mid 80s,
New
maybe.
Gold Dream, Simple Minds.
And what was cool was that because it was a big deal, no one had ever done ads, TV ads for albums before all the artists were interested.
Yeah.
So I met them all, which I found I was totally fangirled. So I did a lot of that, did a lot of work for the record companies and a lot of work for Our Price, learned how to cut up songs. Again, clueless, if I'm honest.
Yeah.
But had a great time, loved it, worked there for about, I don't know, a year and a half or so. Went travelling, came back.
Why did you come back?
Came back because my boyfriend wanted to come back. I didn't
Yeah.
want to come back.
Yeah.
Yeah. But anyway, I did come
He
back.
was a Kiwi.
He was a
the-
Kiwi. Yeah, ended up being the father of my children. We came back. At that time, I'd been producing my own work in London, and I liked it. I quite liked it. I've got that side to me. I like to be organised. When I came back, for some reason, I got offered a job. I was talking to Jeff Williams, who's in the film production side of things, ad production, and
Yeah.
I got a job at Cranbrook Films. I decided, maybe I'll be a producer.
Was
Peter Avery,
Roger?
Roger Tompkins.
Roger Tompkins, yeah.
Again, I felt I was the baby, really. And I was a production assistant and I worked like a demon. There was a woman called Kate Aiken, I think her name was. It was hers. It was her
Yeah.
and Roger's. She was my first kind of insight into just a fantastic, glamorous woman who was living at large and
a
writing
mentor?
her own history. Just purely by association. Yeah, terrified of her.
Yeah.
And there was a young guy called Jason, and he had to get food for everyone. And everyone wanted different food all every day, and it was terrifying for him. And he had to figure out how to bring back the food so it was still hot. It was like the earliest of Uber Eats.
Yeah.
Again, lots of experience. I got a lot of experience on the ground. Realised quite quickly, though, I didn't really want to be the very last person to leave the set, which you are if you work production side.
Yeah, it's a long day.
Fuck, mate. Like, I loved it, but then I didn't anymore. I realised I needed to create. I didn't want to just produce what other people were creating. I realised I enjoyed the combination. So I got a job at Ogilvy in Mather, it was called then.
Who was running it then?
I think it was someone like Daryl Hughes.
Okay.
And the big break for me is that the creative director was a guy called Barry Eadie, and he didn't seem to, I never felt that I was a girl. There was nothing in my way, and there were very few girls.
You're listening to Truth
And Soul.
the New Zealand Advertising Podcast.
So I guess I should ask, so you never felt that your sex was holding you back within the industry, that people had old attitudes towards...
I was acutely aware that I had a different game to play.
Yeah.
From the very beginning. I was very lucky that I did kind of see the whole industry as a little bit of a coliseum, and you had to play your part.
Yeah.
But like I said, I was really grateful that with Barry, he just gave me great briefs, and I did very, very well. And I actually went to go find him recently to thank him, because it was really him that set me up.
Yeah.
And he died of a brain hemorrhage or something to do with his brain a few years ago. I looked up, some old associates in those days. So I think I might have been 2 or 3 years into it. And that was when I was first made joint creative director.
With?
A guy called Rod Schofield.
Yeah.
So I remember vividly thinking, righto, I need to make sure that I leverage this. And again, I look back on it and go, God, where did all that come from? I walked into Barry's office and I said, I'm really excited about this opportunity. I think it's really clear I'm going to be the one that runs the department, and that you really want me in this role. I'm not going to take it unless you give me the same salary as my associate. I had no idea what salary he was on. Yeah. But I damn well knew it wasn't going to be the same as mine.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I said, I'll give you 24 hours, talk to me tomorrow. And the next day I got a $20,000 pay rise.
Bit late for me to try that one, I think, but...
Well, it just goes to show that he was probably on a minimum of $20,000 more than me. And I was doing, I was up there. So every pay rise I've ever had, I've asked for. And I've had to basically place my case. And I've got it every single time because I've got a good case. Yeah, yeah. You pay for me or you don't pay for me. You've always got to be prepared to leave. That's the only thing. But every time, Yeah,
you can't threaten without the means to
No, and
carry out
it's
your
not
stuff.
a threat. It's not a threat either. It's like, look, I'm really aware. Yeah. Often I wasn't. I just had an absolute implicit understanding that, as they still are, women are paid less. And I wasn't going to be paid less, basically.
Why do you think they are paid less?
I think they're paid less because the whole of the business world is still run by men, and and the whole kind of female goes home. Female is the one that will head off at a certain point to have the children and come back. And they don't stick up for themselves as much. Well, historically, they haven't.
So do you think...
it's very insidious, the sexism. It's very insidious. There's never one thing you can put your finger on. That's what's clever about it, and that's what makes it so very sustainable still in 2019.
Well, I presume it's not an actual conspiracy, it's just the way things happen.
It's implicit, yeah. It's just a part of it. It's just a part of the fabric of business.
So if men are in charge, they pay women less. If women are in charge, does that equal out?
I've got no idea. I don't know the stats.
Yeah.
But I would imagine there would be less. It would be less casual.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so
got the big pay rise and took the job on.
Got the pay rise, top of the world. Ogilvy were a pretty big player in those days?
Yeah, it was one of the agencies.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was totally one of the agencies.
Based in
Wellington. In Wellington.
Oh,
in Wellington. I was still in Wellington.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think I worked there for 3 years. Again, and I have no interest in dates. So I think I was there about 2 or 3 years, maybe 3.
And in those days, Wellington was the centre of advertising.
Yeah, it really was. And Mackay King was the absolute epicentre in those days. It sold out to Saatchi, which set Saatchi up in New Zealand. And so that was a great agency for me to be at, even though I felt reasonably lost in it. I was aware of the people. There was a guy called Barry Manley who was the ultimate gentleman. They were all there.
So people like Kim and Peter Cullinane and
so they were
Howard.
all. My next job was in fact at Saatchi, so I went from Ogilvy into Saatchi, and I was hired by Kim.
Yeah.
And they were all there.
Was Len Cheeseman there then, or he came in later?
No, he came just after where I was. Yeah. Yeah, so I got maybe 3 years into Ogilvy, and to be honest, I just had no mentors. I knew that it wasn't good that I was someone in my 20s running a department. I knew that I needed to work for people way cleverer than me.
Yeah.
I knew that I needed to be challenged and inspired. And at that time as well, I decided with Ogilvy I was going to go to work in Hong Kong. I was going to go and do that thing. They sent me over to Hong Kong. I'd even bought a house so that I could rent it out. And I went to Hong Kong and I met this atrocious Ogilvy creative director at the time who told me that there was no such thing as a new idea, and that he used these award books, because they were all books, annuals, and he used them the way doctors used encyclopedias to figure out what the diagnosis was. And he didn't want to waste time with people thinking that they could reinvent things. And I thought, this isn't going to work, because I was still that very young creative guy.
So you'd gone there to live and work?
I'd gone there to interview and have a look at it. And my plan was to go there. And then I came back and thought, actually, I don't want to do this.
Had you been to Hong Kong before?
I'd been to Hong Kong once before,
staying there. So I
really liked it. I thought it would be the coolest thing in the world,
Yeah.
Do
you know who that creative director was?
No idea. I'm not a very good subject, am I?
No, well, no, that's fine.
For your history.
Don't want to be libelous, because I could have, we could have edited out, but it would just have been interested, because I'm guessing he was from London.
I think he was either British or South African. Yeah, but he tried to crush my spirit. Yeah. Wasn't the first person to try and do that, but he certainly tried. And I built a career on it, but yeah. Came back and thought, right, I got to go. So I went to Saatchi. I was hired by Kim. It was the massive days of Saatchi where they made Accentuate the Positive TVCs and had the geese flying in formation, and it was a very interesting experience for me. It was.
Sorry, for those of you who were not in the industry at that time, I'm not sure. We have one listener. I'm not sure who it is yet, but Saatchis were. I came to New Zealand 20 years ago, and Saatchis were famous then for having run an ad for themselves on the TV.
Yeah. It was a remarkable time. And the people I learned the most from, in fact, were people like Peter Cullinane. Yeah. I learned an absolute tenacity. Like we would pitch a piece of business and we might not win it, but he'd get it. He'd get it 18 months later. He wasn't a man that gave up.
Was that obviously hard work and persistence? But I'm guessing, I don't know Peter, but I'm guessing charm came into that as well? He
was a very interesting man. He was charming, but not in a standard ad man charming way. He's just a brilliant man, you know. Massive respect, absolutely massive respect. Like I would say, my first mentor was Barry Eadie, not realising I was a chick. Yeah. I definitely felt there were three females in the creative department at Saatchi at one point. We actually, this is a side story, but it's a funny one. When Saatchi Auckland opened, we had formed a band, the three girls at Saatchi. We'd formed a band, we could sing. Two of us could sing. The band was called the Standing Ovulations, which was funny. And we were Saatchi Auckland's present. So we were flown up. So pretty much everyone from Wellington went up to Saatchi Auckland, and, it was opening at the Strand. And I was freaking out. We arrive. It's down in the giant atrium. There's a big band. Yeah. Big band. And we're singing these three songs. Sometimes it's hard to be a writer. It's my concept, and I'll cry if I want to. So we rewrote it all. We had the dance moves. We had this costume designer do all these plastic outfits for us where our ovaries were on the outside. I think mine was stuffed with money or maybe Barbie clothes or something.
Yeah.
Very, very funny. Yeah, so we were the opening act for Saatchi Auckland. The standing ovulations.
Doesn't happen these days.
No,
They
no
don't
money.
have singing groups flown up from Wellington
Not
to
really.
Auckland.
3 girl creatives, yeah.
So who was running Saatchi's Auckland then? Who was like the first CEO, ECD?
I don't know who Roy Mears, I think, was in the house.
Yeah. That's pre-Kevin Roberts?
Yes, yeah. And you can see this by this theme of the way I talk. I remember events, I remember feelings, I remember occasions. I just sailed through. I didn't connect particularly with, some of the dramas and comings and goings and.
So you never had a plan as such?
I just really wanted to do great work and have a great time.
Yeah.
Yeah, I wanted to do great work, have a great time, and kind of respect.
And be paid as much as the men.
Yeah. What an unusual thought.
Yeah.
An unusual thought to be paid as much as the men. And again, that wasn't my drive. It was just about fairness. It was just about fairness.
Yeah.
I'm doing a great job. I'm doing everything you need me to do. The clients have always loved me.
Yeah.
I've actually, to be honest, I've always felt that I'm really a strategist, that wore, and now that's pretty much what I do all the time. I was a strategist who had a coat on, which was multicoloured. It was called a creative coat. But really, I was really very, very comfortable with my clients talking about their business. That made me an anomaly because, as a creative, you're supposed to be in charge of the creative. And I found the industry desperately them and us. I never actually understood that there was a thing called a creative department because it seemed to me that a department of creativity meant that other people couldn't be creative. I didn't understand the department of creativity. I was very happy to be in it because it was the coolest department, but I didn't understand why it wasn't a group effort. I really worked well with suits who wanted to write great briefs. I did a lot of work when I was a creative director getting the account people to write great briefs, and I really celebrated that as the first stage of the creative process. For me, it was always about the freedom of a tightly defined brief. Thank you, David Ogilvy. Loved all of that, loved my clients, loved actually spending time with them talking about their business. I think that that's probably more common now, but it certainly wasn't then. You were very much put in your box, and your box was a coloured one, and you were in the creative department. And I loved my clients, really loved them.
Yeah, I mean, as a junior in London in the 90s, Mike Cousins, who was the ECD then, probably just creative director, but you weren't allowed to go and see the clients.
Yeah.
You had to hand your work to the suits, and they went off to see the client, and you should be getting on with doing more work, not worrying about selling it, and the suits were going to sell it, so it didn't matter. Yeah, my issue with that was that often the suits didn't sell it, whether that was their fault or whether it was the work's fault or the client's fault, but they didn't often do it. And I always thought that the best, generally, if you're a washed creative and reasonably erudite, worldly, knew your stuff, you could have a conversation. You would have the best chance of selling it just because you knew the work backwards.
And the best creative people are incredibly strategic. They actually don't just have ideas for the sake of it. They are connected to what it is that we're trying to help sell.
Yeah.
So, and actually that, the standing ovulations, the song, It's My Concept and I'll Cry If I Want To, was because Saatchi was going through a phase where we weren't allowed out of the creative department.
Yeah.
It was exactly that. We weren't allowed to present our own ideas. And if I'm 10 things, one of them is persuasive.
Yes.
So I found that very, very difficult to not be able to represent my own ideas, and not just that, but work with the client on the spot if there was something that was sticky for them. That was how I could get just about anything sold, was listening. I've always been really good at listening to my clients. Yeah. And then I can interpret what it is. Doesn't necessarily, if they say make it bigger, it doesn't mean that. It might mean I want a sense of X, Y, Z. So I was always very good at listening and interpreting what clients meant, not necessarily what they said.
No, that's very true, Jill. I think that when you get email feedback, it rarely does it actually address what the issue is,
No,
and it takes it takes a conversation to get to the bottom of what's going on.
And I've also always had an idea, which is that really ideas kind of belong to God, and you just have to have another one if you can't get that one through. So I've worked really hard not to be too kind of, devastated when ideas don't go, because, it's absolutely true. When I was in creative departments, I was very, very aware that 8 out of 10 creatives, when they come into me, they weren't saying, what do you think of my ideas? They were saying, what do you think of me? It's a very personal process, this creativity.
Yes.
So, so I was really aware of that. I worked very hard with my teams to, I worked hard as a creative director. I really enjoyed growing people, inspiring them, helping them see the wood from the trees, blah, blah, blah.
And so from Saatchi's Wellington, you went to...
Saatchi Wellington really was a big experience for me. Sort of, I was exhausted by the end of it. I don't know if I was exhausted more than quite cynical. I'd done some cool things there. Like I wrote, I'm in my 20s still, I wrote the Treaty of Waitangi campaign. I hadn't read the Treaty of Waitangi. Most New Zealanders hadn't read the Treaty of Waitangi. I can't believe they gave it to me. I don't know, this white girl from Invercargill. But it was the beginning of me really loving what I did, because I dove into it. I learned a lot about the treaty and our history and what a red-hot wound it was for so many people, and it was very research-led. There was a woman called Louise Gregg who was the first experience I had at an incredible researcher. Not like, hey, let me tell you what you already know, but here are some really profound insights that you can use. So that was the first time that I really felt like I was learning what it was that was unique about my personal talent, which wasn't actually, what a crazy idea, who thought of that? It was listening deeply and writing something which had enormous integrity for the task that was required. So I loved Saatchi from that point of view. I got to work on helping kids stay in school. There was safe sex campaigns. There was the Treaty of Waitangi, which I loved. So there was a lot of public purpose stuff because it was Wellington.
I love doing the research. You get a new brief and something that you don't know about, the research about it. That is almost my favourite stage, because you're educating yourself on something that you didn't know about.
Yeah.
Another area of the supermarket or another area of the national consciousness.
Yeah. And I'm really grateful, in fact, that my advertising trajectory was I never really did FMCG. I was always like...
You missed out.
Changing minds, changing behaviours, deep things. Like with Treaty of Waitangi, we shot this ad with a young white boy and a young brown boy. Lee Tamahori shot it for me. We shot it on a beach in Gisborne, which was hugely important to Māoridom. I used Delvanius Prime, who I knew was this musician who would do an incredible job. I met Whina Cooper, and she was one of my voiceovers, which was amazing. Whina Cooper's like, the mother of the nation. It was amazing. And because I'd done everything really ethically and correctly and from a deep, authentic place myself, there was no controversy. It was a beautiful campaign, and North and South contacted me about 2 years ago because they had tracked down the brown boy and the white boy, and now they're adults, and they, followed their trajectory, and there's a whole piece on what happened to those boys, And I was the young up-and-coming creative at that time. Saatchi, I decided there was a moment at Saatchi where I thought, I can't do this anymore. And it was an agency that really, really believed in itself to the extreme. Like it was like working for Pepsi Cola or something. I remember we had a big staff meeting and there was an ad that was played, and it was for a cell phone. So that was pretty amazing. And it was an average ad.
That was telecom.
Yeah. It was a sort of a slice of life ad,
Yeah.
There's nothing amazing about it. 2 people were running, one of them had a cell phone, the phone rang, that was it. And I remember the whole agency was whooping and cheering and punching the air. Like literally, I remember looking around going, it's not
Are you mad?
Not that good. What the fuck? And someone
become a
called
cult.
it would become a total cult. It was an extreme level of cult. It was also was a massive learning exercise for me in that I felt very, I did feel very female. Huge amounts of conversations and the way ideas were formed and, in fact, chosen were in the bar at night. That was a very male environment. I certainly didn't feel I could go into that bar at night. I also had no desire to go into that bar at night. It was very male. It was very big, deep, loud voices laughing, a lot of shoulders, that turned away from you. I found it a very challenging environment. I'm grateful for it, super grateful for it. Like, I learned a lot of things, but they weren't necessarily how to make a great ad campaign. That I learned how to tell stories, well and truly, emotional stories, which is what I do now for brand. There was a lot of stuff that went on there, but when that particular campaign and that meeting, it was called the ultimate penny drop moment. And I thought, because she hasn't got a cell phone, I didn't see it as the ultimate penny drop moment. It was an absolute cult, and I wasn't in the cult, basically. I was on the outside of the cult looking in going, this is like crazy. This is not a cure for cancer.
Yeah.
I'm uncomfortable with it. So I left. I went to Auckland, and I actually went to Communicado and worked for Neil Roberts. So we're deviating over into television land. Neil Roberts was the first guy he kind of made the very, very early reality TV. He did lots of TV series, and I can't remember any of them, of course. And he wanted a little advertising trophy. That's what he wanted.
So Communicado was an agency? Or
No,
was
it was a production company, but it was a TV production company. They made a lot of TV. They made TV. And so my idea was I was going to pivot into TV. So they hired me. At the time, the first infomercials were starting to happen.
Wonderful days.
Wonderful days of the infomercial. But what I did respect about what Communicado was doing was essentially they would go in and sweep into ANZ or one of the really big clients, and they would say it's the suffragette year or something about year of the female. Let's do a whole series, and they were actually little programs. So they were like little mini programs brought to you by the ANZ or brought to you by Telecom. So he managed to basically turn these little, instead of doing a 30-minute TV show, he was doing a 1-minute TV show, little story. It wasn't selling anything. It was telling us a beautiful story about our country, our heritage, whatever. And it would be tagged with the client. So it was the beginning of, it was actually very clever in hindsight.
Sponsored content?
It was sponsored content. It was the first sponsored content that I think, and I'll bet you he's never been credited with being one of the people who brought sponsored content, the beginning of sponsored content. But that was my job.
I wasn't aware of that, Joel. I just mention here that for our younger listener, that Saatchi and Saatchi Wellington were a big deal. They were known. I was working in London in the 90s, and I remember they would have a list of the top 10 agencies in the world, and they were generally British and American, but Saatchi's New Zealand, Saatchi's Wellington, would appear in there, and that was pre-internet days. So for people to know what work was being done, because it wasn't generally accepted that everybody entered all their work into Can. It would involve a bit of searching out. Yeah. I suspect Len Cheeseman, who was there at some time, I'd known from London, he'd been one of the tutors when I was at college. He was down there, and he was probably keeping all his mates in London well informed of what he was up to.
Yeah, it was I feel very, my whole advertising trajectory, I feel very blessed. I was at Mackay, my first agency was Mackay King. Ogilvy was one of the very best places you could learn. I learned, and I was given an opportunity. Then Saatchi was, the glory days. It was a cult. Yeah. And it certainly, there were some wheels on that track that were quite wobbly as far as I could see. And I was never going to be able to completely buy into it. I was a girl in one of the offices working hard, I always felt like I had to work epically hard. And I did. Yeah. Yes. And I liked it. I liked it. That's the thing. I have vivid memory of working on the National Bank, bringing back the Black Horse. I was involved with that campaign where it was like Lloyd's of London had this black horse in its logo. we wanted to create this bank that became the Thoroughbred. So I worked on that whole, the Black Horse campaign. And there was a chief executive of the National Bank at the time who was singularly the rudest man I've ever presented to.
Well, you hadn't met me at that point. So, yeah.
So I was the girl again. He didn't understand why there would be a girl in his office unless she was saying, "How do you have your coffee?" And I wasn't. I didn't know until afterwards that there was in fact a dress code on his whole floor. Women had to wear skirts and they had to be of a certain length. And it was pretty remarkable if you look back on it. I didn't know any of that. I was, full fashionista.
So I like the fact that, I came down in 2000 from the UK and I signed up with the National Bank, must have been your advertising that did it. But I saw the Black Horse everywhere and I went, oh, crikey, I didn't realise that Lloyd's of London had a bank in New Zealand. But I also heard that from Kiwis who'd go up to London and they go everywhere and they go, wow, they've got the New Zealand bank is up in London.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, it was a nice, I was on the side of that whole thing, but I loved it. But I used to have to present to this dude and he would sit in his swivel chair and as soon as I started presenting, he would swivel away from me. So he'd have his back to me. And I was showing him boards because that's what you did. And I would go, would you like me to stop? And he'd go, I can hear you. So I'd carry on. Nice. Yeah, pretty special dude. Yeah.
And he was the CEO, not the marketing guy.
He was the CEO. He was the CEO because those were the days, there was multi-millions of dollars being sold. Yeah, I liked working.
Good old days when you could turn your back on advertising people who were presenting.
Well, especially girls. He did not know what to do with me. He didn't have a clue. Yeah. So I worked at Communicato for a year. I realised it was the slowest, that making television content was in fact very slow going. It's not now. It's very fast. But back then, there was no money. Yeah. It was like you'd get $100,000 for a 1 hour episode of something and I'd think, geez, we were getting $100,000 for 30 seconds. We were getting $1 million for 30 seconds sometimes. So I lasted a year. It was good though. I was super burned out. It re-engaged me with what I loved about advertising. I started working for Mojo. Yep. There's a guy called Pete Fantle there. Yeah. At the time, he was quite well known and he had gathered together this glorious team of rogues who I basically ended up inheriting and loved them, ended up taking them to my next agency with me. So it was like Luke Nola and Mikhail Gurman was my creative partner, who's now half of Karen Walker. Yeah. Steve Asen was my creative partner for a while, who's now a world-famous director.
Yeah, very good director.
Very good director. Yep.
Yeah, excellent.
Extraordinary. Yeah. So he was my creative partner for quite a while. It was a great crew. Like Steve Susi, who's a director now. We were basically, they were the glory days because for me, it was like coming home. We were all freaks and nerds, actually. We weren't advertising animals. We were creative animals that happened to find a way to earn good money being creative and telling stories and inventing shit. And so that I found those days really great. So I became creative director of that agency. And that was the first agency I was properly on leadership teams with. Blah, blah, blah.
It's interesting that, say, when I was creative director of DDB, the guys from that department have gone on to, lots of them to do really well. But within the industry, whereas that period of time at Mojo, they kind of expanded outwards and did more than just went on to build great careers in advertising.
Yeah, they did. Because none of us were really advertising animals. That's why. We weren't, none of us. And you can hear from my story, I was never an advertising animal, really. Yeah. It was never my bag. I just loved telling stories. I loved the creative environment. I liked the pressure. I liked the kind of, I've got to have 12 ideas overnight. Is this good enough? I'm a very, very driven person. So it was always like, can I do better? Can I do better? Can I do better? But that was a great time because we were all of a similar ilk, we were all going to go on and do other things. And we weren't that bothered with what anyone else was doing, really. We just wanted to do great work. So I loved the Mojo era. I loved it. It was intense. Again, worked really, really hard. I did a lot of work, again, did some work with Carlton and United Breweries. So again, I would have been the first girl I'm sure I was the first girl that was in that Melbourne boardroom who hadn't said, how do you have your coffee, sir? They didn't know what to do with a girl, so they took me to the Grand Prix. That's the beginning of my love for motor racing.
Seriously?
Yeah, seriously. Yep. Yeah, didn't know what to do with the girl. But I was doing good work. I fell in love with. Yeah, I love motor racing. I look back and I go, for that whole career of mine in advertising, traditional marketplace, I felt like I was wading through mud. I felt like I was wading through mud. Everything was kind of hard. I knew that I had great connections with my clients, that I was doing great work and telling good stories, but I wasn't on the same, I wasn't completely driven by awards. I didn't really care if the logo needed to go up a few notches.
Yeah.
I don't think it really made any fucking difference, I had to keep really mum about all of that. I had to almost keep mum about the fact that I was really interested in how the advertising worked.
Yeah.
Nobody much cared back then how the advertising worked. I cared.
You have to
I loved
be
my
so careful
clients.
as maybe it's a writer thing, I don't know, that to when the client goes, it'd be good at, you look at the logo and you go, it's a bit small, isn't it? The client goes, it'd be nice if the logo's a little bit bigger, and the art directors are throwing toys around and everything, and you're going, well, he's got a point. Really.
Yeah. It doesn't really fucking matter, and it really doesn't. So great days. Yeah, great days. Interesting projects.
So did you start up your own place after Mojo, or was it?
No, then I went to Bates.
Bates, and became Generator?
Yeah.
Who was running that then?
I was hired by Terry Kings for the second time.
Okay.
Yeah, they were. So that was interesting. So there was a leadership team there who individually were all brilliant, but we couldn't make it work. Yeah, it was a very, very challenging time in the industry with that group of people. Yeah.
All right, we'll leave that there.
I brought over quite a few people from Mojo and tried to make it work. Yeah, there's a lot of stuff that went on. There's a lot of stuff that went on at Bates. We had a great creative department because I'd brought over Steve. I'd brought Mikhail with me. I had Steve Asen and Steve Susi. Mikhail was with me. I brought people, a couple of females in. There was this moment, actually. It was, advertising. I don't know if they still do. They used to do this big art auction where, of course, we're all creatives and
not for a while.
A lot of the art, you remember it. Yeah. There was a big art auction. So I was at Bates at that point, and I was downstairs. There wasn't so much, I had my name had quite a cachet, but no one particularly knew what I looked like because I wasn't one of those girls about town at all. And I was standing in the back of the auction, and this young female came up to me and she said, "Hi, my name's whatever it was." And she said, "Did I work in advertising?" And I said, "Yes." And she said, "Oh, that's so great because there's hardly any female creatives, senior female creatives." And I said, No, there isn't. And she said, "Well, there's that Jill Brinsdon." And I thought, she doesn't have a fucking clue I'm Jill Brinsdon. And I went, "Yeah." And
She's
she went,
great.
She said, apparently she's a real bitch. Apparently she's she's a ball breaker. She's really hard on women. Like, it was such an eye-opener for me that somehow this young woman was having a go at the one female that had opened all the fucking doors for her. No idea. And I said, "Oh, she must be pretty good at what she does." And to have achieved what she has. And don't get me wrong, no, I've heard she's incredible, but, a ball breaker, that was the phrase. And I went, "Oh, well, probably we have to look after our own and support each other. I wish you all the best." And I left, and I thought, fuck, I really hope she sees a photo of me in the next 6 weeks because she's going to...
Well, I wonder if she'll ever get around to listening to this and go, "Oh, my God."
Jesus Christ.
I didn't realise.
I mean, to some degree, that was the kind of vibe. You were a girl. It's right to the end. It was like the 70s poster. He's assertive, she's aggressive,
Yes.
Yeah. You had to be, I'm a good salesperson. You had to be incredibly good. Here's what I learned, and I give this to any female, particularly who's listening to this, eventually, when you've got your big listenership.
Yeah, when we're up to 2 listeners.
Yeah, and one of them's a chick.
Yeah.
I did this massive pivot when I shifted from Saatchi to Mojo. At Saatchi, I just kept thinking, this is really not fair. I'm having great ideas. I'm working really hard. At Mojo, but I never got to be heard. It was always that teams were all being pitched against each other. I'd have a bit of an idea and they'd grab that bit and they'd put it in with another team. I just constantly felt, really out of sorts and felt like it was really a difficult environment and certainly not at all conducive for me to blossom. I went to Mojo and I went, you know what? It isn't fair, Jill. So nothing's fair. It's not fair in kindergarten. You see people pushing each other over in kindy and grabbing what they want. And I'm not saying that that's what advertising was, but there was an aspect of that.
Yeah, for sure.
And so I changed my game. And I thought, you know what, I can still do it authentically. I can still be me. I can still have integrity. What I started to do was what I saw the boys at Saatchi do very well, pre-seed ideas, get the key influencer who, might have been, in fact, the TV producer or the senior account director and say, I want to bounce some thoughts off you. I've got this idea or I've got this idea. Which one do you think? So that I became very, very good at influencing the influencers, pre-seeding ideas, playing the game, but within my own dynamic. And that's when I took off. So that's really, Mojo was when I absolutely took off and started flying. It felt like to me, yeah. I suddenly didn't feel those constraints. The mud wasn't quite so thick that I was wading through every day. It felt like I could run. It was there were a lot of quite. Sandy Bergen was a lead account director at the time. She's gone on to do great stuff in the leadership space. Yeah, we were doing great work. It was a lot of fun.
Sandy is, as we speak, as you can see, she's running one of her courses on Great Barrier Island.
Where she's got a place, yeah. So there was great people. There was a guy called Rick Slovett. He was an American guy. He came up from Chiat Day.
Yeah. Question: why aren't there many female creatives? It's probably 3-4 to 1.
Yeah.
Why do you think that is?
What are the numbers? What are the numbers at award school? And is that it? Are they not coming in, or question. Are they falling out?
I'd have to talk to Kate at Media Design School.
Yeah.
Because I would imagine that she does what she can to equalise, to get it more 50.
Yeah. Look, I think it's gladiatorial. I don't know if it still is, but it was very gladiatorial when I was in advertising. It was, we were all in there together, but you needed your ideas to get through. And I was often in creative departments where it was like, right, 3 teams are getting this. You're pitching against each other. There was a lot of that. So it had a real gladiatorial quality to it. You had to be very resilient. You had to play the game. As a female, you were definitely put over into the girl products in a heartbeat. You had to stick up for yourself. I had to stick up for myself relentlessly. I was from Invercargill, and we needed to stick up for ourselves anyway.
Yeah.
So I always had that, and I never resented it, to be honest. I just thought, well, I got to stick up for myself here. It was kind of a part of the game, which is why I was fine, I think. But I think for a lot of women, they would possibly look at it and go, this is bullshit.
Yeah, it is gladiatorial. There is, if you're, say, at one of the bigger agencies, they might have 3 intern teams there. And a brief, and it would be whoever cracks that brief has a job. The other 2
don't get it.
Have to go. I remember I used to work with Mike O'Sullivan in London, and I remember after we'd been there, I don't know, year and a half, another team came in, and we both got briefed on a beer, and it was more or less unspoken that if we didn't crack the brief, if our work didn't win out, that we would be fired.
Yeah.
And that was
it.
Yeah, that's the way the industry worked. And
which is why I use that word, And if you think about gladiators, you think about the Roman days, there weren't that many chicks in those arenas.
Yeah, no.
There weren't very many girls.
No, a few lionesses maybe, but...
Yeah, exactly. So I by the end, I absolutely, about halfway through, I kind of got my head around it and felt like I had found a way to be clever enough and to be smart enough and to be savvy enough to have my own role in the arena. Yeah, but I think your question about why aren't there more women, I would imagine it's still quite gladiatorial. And I think there would be a lot of women who would just go, this is not the way I want to spend my life.
Yes.
Yeah, there's got to be a kinder way to use my creativity.
You're listening to Truth
And Soul,
the New Zealand Advertising Podcast.
in London, you would be on placement, do the placement rounds, and if you were lucky, that went on for a few months. If you were unlucky, that could go on for years, 3 years.
Yeah.
And the word was, and during that time, as a bloke, you were or sleeping on people's floors, eating beans on toast, scrounging beer at the agency fridge. You had no money. And I've heard it said that blokes were prepared to do that, and girls go, "Nah, this is not on."
Yeah, maybe. I can speak observationally, really. Yeah. So it was after Bates that I went, I'm out. I'm out. I want to start. I didn't want to start an ad agency. I didn't. I wanted to. What I was really witnessing was agencies trying to say, you need to be on TV and then we'll do this and then we'll do that. And I was seeing clients that weren't campaign ready.
Yeah.
So I would do the beautiful advertising campaign for something that was essentially an invented idea. It didn't work because it was an invented idea. And I would think, why am I'm doing work that I know isn't going to work? The organisation needs retuning. The sales force don't know what they're doing. No one's been briefed about what we're trying to achieve. Leadership isn't involved with it. So that was my early era of the work that I do now, which is actually behavioural. Brand is behavioural. Advertising might not be, but brand is behavioural. If your culture isn't reflecting what you're saying you're not. So I could see a lot of that happening. And so when I started radiation, I really wanted, I was the first to actually say no specialists on staff. I wasn't going to have any creative people. They would all be hired as would cultural experts, depending on the task. My last conversation in advertising, which was my crowning glory to some degree, was I went into who was the chief executive at that time, and I said there was some smart people there. Sandy Callister, who's brilliant, was the strategic planner. There's a guy called Paul Sherman, who's now in the UK. He's a planner. He was the media director. Michael Prentice, who's amazing. We were all individually amazing, but we couldn't make it work. I went into the CEO at the time, who was called Noel Brown, and I said, Noel, I want to have a word. I'm a very clean person. I said, there's one client you're going to need to really circle, because I have a relationship with her which isn't just creative. She really regards me strategically. It was the Caltex brand. We'd just done 3 years of this, my favourite campaign, which was the Caltex Mystery Motorist, where we dressed this dude up and he went into all the different Caltex all over the country. Funny. And he took a drag on his cigarette. We were out on the balcony. We were possibly even in his office.
You probably didn't have to be on a balcony.
No, I think he might have even been in his office. And he looked at me and he said, he was an Australian guy, once again, Jill Brinsdon, you overvalue your importance to this agency. It was the last thing he said to me. So I am very clean. I said, well, look, I just wanted to give you that opportunity. She's not going to be happy about my departure, and I don't see any of the other people stepping up to play the role I played. So I wish you all the best. I rang the client.
So you'd been resigning?
I'd resigned already, and I was literally trying to keep a very clean, clean slate. That's the girl I am. And anyway, I rang the client and I said, look, I just want you to know that I've tried. I didn't pitch at all for the business. I said, I just want you to know I've spoken to Noel and said da-da-da-da. And she just went, did he say that? And 6 weeks later, she gave me the business. So that was the beginning of what radiation was, which was this beautiful calling card for me to be able to say that I'm continuing to work strategically and creatively on Caltex. I had 6 months of that before it was globalised. So it went into the YNR network. And then she went up to Singapore and she made YNR use radiation as her creative department. So at that point I was still doing some advertising while I was building up the more brand work, because it was a very new concept, the idea of brand being a storytelling exercise. It's only just coming into its play now, to be honest. Yeah, so I was a very early player there. And then she went up to the States and I went up to the States with her. So that was when radiation was properly appointed. And that's when I really genuinely began to separate myself off. So I was doing huge amounts of cultural work with her teams. We did a massive, the last big campaign radiation ever did was this glorious thing to launch a truck motor oil 15W30 into
Tug of war.
The tug of war.
Because I was going to ask you, because I was looking at it on YouTube, and I'm going, hang on, this is a truck oil for the States that is, because I didn't know the backstory about Caltex, but now it's starting to make sense.
So I travelled with her, and to be honest, it was a remarkable piece of business for about 15 years, and I didn't just end up working with her. We ended up working across 7 or 8 different clients, and now one of those clients from the era of Chevron, so I was working up in Chevron.
Yeah,
I really cut my teeth on how to get brilliant work out of people, did a lot of work with them culturally. So the mystery, that project, that whole truck versus tug, who will win in the ultimate tug of war, came from massive amounts of insight watching truckers talk about their lives all over. I think they flew me to Houston and Arizona and all sorts of Sacramento listening to truckers. And then we got full permission to not do any advertising because nobody believes it. Yeah. So we created this Mythbusters style, thing. I worked with Luke Nola. We came up with, I think, 17 different Mythbusters events. They chose the tug of war and we literally shot it. And it was for real. We shot it twice. Was that Simon Mark Brown? Yeah, I took Simon up with me. Yeah. Amber Easby, who's probably the best human being I've ever worked with, I hired her as my producer. Yeah. We hooked into a production company up in the States. She was the genius. I needed somebody who was a fantastic barker, which is Simon. Yeah. So we had Simon and we had an editor. Luke was up there. I was up there. I think there were 4 or 5 of us that travelled up, but there was a crew of about 50 that we hooked into. It
looked dangerous.
Yeah.
It looked like, well, what
it was the real deal.
So I know you had the explosive.
Yeah, we did. We did.
So for those of you who haven't seen it, it's on a pier, a very large truck and a tugboat, and there's a rope between them. And you're going, well, if the tug does win, then this is a very large truck with a bloke inside it. He wasn't wearing a life jacket. It ends up in the water, and if the truck wins, then the tug gets smashed into the pier.
It was a stunning project because we really worked. It was a proper piece of content. We seeded it in all the trucking blogs to start with. So we seeded who would win. Imagine if there was a tug of war between a truck and this is an 18-wheel, massive truck and a.
Yeah, it wasn't a ute.
No, it was. They were big things. We were on LA Wharf. We had the LAPD there because they were worried. The wharf police were there. They were worried about the wharf coming down. Yeah. Although, of course, everything was, Chevron's safety culture is second to none. So we kind of knew what was going to happen. But still there's a lot of old Hollywood guys as well who'd just come off films who were working on it. And because it involved this sort of storyline it did, it was very sticky. Everyone wanted a part of it. And I think it's got, 1.7 unique million views now? Yep. 1.7 million views. So, we seeded it. We got the truckers all talking about it. We got it on, news shows in the morning. Then, wouldn't you know it, Chevron actually hosts this thing. It was beautiful. Then we did a whole lot of digital work, which was shifting it over into what kind of driver are you? Are you a heavy-duty driver or are you a severe-duty driver? Digital quizzes, and people were checking, so the truckers are all checking. Because we essentially created a new category of driving, which is the severe duty, not heavy duty. Severe duty is actually sounds like it's very dramatic, like it's ice road truckers, like my star. It's not. It's actually stopping and starting constantly because that whole industry has shifted and the way engines work. They're put under a lot more stress because there's so much more stopping and starting, shorter trips, bigger hauls, blah, blah, blah. So, so that really, that was for radiation, that were glory days of decent sized budgets, 9 cameras. We shot it twice. It was amazing. It was an incredible experience, the whole thing. And very a beautiful rounding out for my advertising career because it was very content led, which I believe in a lot more than making up an ad for the sake of it. So I loved the fact that it was very real, that the truckers loved it, that it was a real story. It was exciting. It was very Mythbusters. And there was a moment in the room where one of the guys, all Americans, there's about 30 people in the room for the pre-prod, said, "How does a little Kiwi company get a job like this? Everyone in America would kill for a job like this. Who brought this into town?" And then every face turned and looked at the little redhead in the corner, which I loved. Yeah, hi, boys. Yeah.
Well, that seems like a good note on which to end.
Yeah.
Jill, thank you so much for coming in.
My pleasure.
And sharing some trips down memory lane and bringing it up to date with, well, more or less up to date with a Caltex story.
Yeah.
And best of luck to you for whatever projects and
Thank you.
businesses
Tricky is the next big project, which is kicking off right now. Yeah.
So Tricky and
Radiation is us. I'm in the process of dissolving a lot of the work into Tricky. I don't want to do I'm basically at the point where I don't want to do advertising output anymore. I want to affect change for businesses. So I'm doing a huge amount of all the brand we develop is storytelling. I'm working very much at the top of organisations, writing stories, writing full architecture, vision, mission, what's the purpose of the organisation, the cultural nuance. I do a lot of values work that connects how the organisation behaves with actually how they say they behave. So there's authenticity there.
I get frustrated by clients who over the years have come to you and say that they have an issue in that people don't think that they're modern and forward thinking enough. So can you do an ad to make them out to be modern and forward thinking? And you go, well, why don't you change your business to be
exactly
rather than just pretending?
100%, Paul. That's where I am. So the work that I'm doing is I just love it because I now have a process which we've developed, and the Chevron work has helped me with that, which is full values development, which involves the staff so they feel engaged. We get it all the way down to behavioural codes, if this is our value, what does it mean we will do? What does it mean we won't do? So that goes into KPIs. So then when it's time for the ad agency to be briefed, if they ever do actually need that kind of stuff, there's an integrity about the story they're telling. I really, really like the work. I've got 2 design partners. So all the work then we'll do logo identity, full website output, all of the, it's a very designed approach. Yeah. But I got to go.
Upstream. Thank you, Jill.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks, babe.
You've been listening to Truth
And Soul,
the New Zealand Advertising Podcast.
Okay, list of credits. Thank you very much to this week's guest, whoever he, she, or it might be. If you liked it, drop us a line, paul@truthandsoul.co.nz. Thank you very much to everyone at Franklin Road, Jonathan, Cole, the Wastrel, Shane, Vanessa and Gracie, Otis, who did the logo, and Matt Stalker, who's going to play us out. Thank you.
On the farewell drive, we found 100 ways that our hands fit together. Centrifugal force pulls us apart as we spin. Please forgive my trembling hands, crudely silhouetted by the flickering spires of candlelight, while the wicked sleep sound, the anxious toss and turn, thoughts come not as single spies, but in battalions, while the wicked sleep sound, the anxious toss and turn. And it's at times like these understand our father's fascination with dendrology. The family tree is losing its leaves. Please forgive my trembling hands, crudely silhouetted by the flickering spires of candlelight, while the wicked sleep sound, the anxious toss and turn. Thoughts come not as single spies, but in battalions, while the wicked sleep sound, the anxious toss and turn.